So, hey, everybody, this is Brian. Just before we get started here, I wanted to mention somebody by the name of Sebastian gave us an email, said that he'd heard about our podcast and wanted to give our listeners a deal on tickets to Hack in the Box Amsterdam, which is occurring from 23 May 2016 to 27th of May 2016. It's 3 days of training, 2 days of speakers and tracks from people like Morgan Marquis-Bois and Sophie D'Antoine from Trail of Bits. If you are interested in going to Hack in the Box Amsterdam, when you're going to buy your tickets and you check out, enter the code BRAKESEC, BRAKESEC, and that'll get you 10% off on the cost of a ticket. So, please take advantage of that. And we thank Sebastian and all of his people over there at Hack in the Box Amsterdam. And that's all I wanted to say. So, on to the podcast. This is Breaking Down Security, and I'm Brian Brake. Welcome back, listener. This is Brian and Mr. Betcher for Breaking Down Security.
Hello.
Hello there. I'm on vacation right now, but due to production values, nobody really sees that. So that's pretty nice. I'm in Chile right now, I think. So,
are you going to visit a Chilean mine?
No. I have nicer places. I have fjords and things to go visit on our scenic cruise on the Holland America ship. So I'm sure I'm loving it and not being at work. So if y'all see me when you hear this, come on down to the place where
Cabana.
The ship hangs out. Yeah, the cabana. There you go. The ship place where the ship goes, and say hey. So, Mr. Betcher, you are the architect of this episode of the podcast. Why don't you give us an intro and explain what the podcast is going to be about this week?
Well, we're going to talk about how to, I guess, strategize your risk assessment by talking about a risk assessment framework. And we brought on a special guest, one Michael Gough, to help us in this, because this is a former job that he had. He used to do this all the time.
He's
so
definitely
welcome.
Special.
Do I have to admit that? I used to have a previous life to malware.
Well, everybody did. I mean, we worked help desk, we worked IT, some people work in compliance, that kind of thing.
Yes, I was a compliance monkey. I admit it.
Well, it could be worse jobs. You could be a, network engineer.
Hey, there's nothing wrong with network engineering or compliance people. I mean, we all have our, specialties, right?
I was a compliance person, then I got better. Oh.
Insulting.
I know.
Yeah, you're going to lose half your listenership, because isn't half of security pretty much GRC?
Oh, that is true. And one lady I do work with, she does GRC probably better than anybody I know. So, hey, Casey, what's up?
It's a different duck than what we do. But, Michael's been in that before. And, I guess he got technical or more technical. How technical did you get in your risk assessments, by the way? Or better yet, what what level of technicality did you need to achieve to do a beneficial risk assessment for a company?
Well, I think how we got to the model we'll talk about a little bit is probably we'll explain some of this. I've always been technical. That's always been one of my strong points. But before we went down in HP, before we went down this ISSM reference model path, and the architect Tarsh Schreider, who developed this whole thing, I think the industry in general did assessments very ad hoc. We would use our expertise skills, in my case, technical skills. Sometimes we had larger assessments, very large clients, and we were brought in as our expertise to assess those areas that we were really good at. So we had some people who are really good at physical security. They'd go to big client A, assess the physical security. If there was some technical controls, they would bring me in, and I'd go deep into the technical controls. And we tried to make sense of it, the old-fashioned ad hoc kind of way. There wasn't really a documented, real refined process until HP developed this information security service management reference model. So my technicalness, while I was at HP, I developed a hardening methodology for operating systems, all operating systems, and we go to clients and implement those for SOX compliance or whatnot. And that included, Solaris and AIX and NIC, just generic Linux, NIC stuff, Windows as well, obviously. And so you had to be technical at those because you were actually flipping the bits to lock these systems down, all based on the Center for Internet Security Benchmarks, which I also participated and contributed to when we were HP members of CIS. So technical has always kind of been in my background.
So it's all coming together now as far as your history, because what you do now is pretty much harden systems and make sure they are configured for proper logging. And so this takes, this kind of, I don't know, you almost came full circle, right? You started out doing that. And now you're doing it for kind of a different reason, but still under the umbrella of security.
Yeah, I used to also travel around with HP and train other consultants to be better consultants for security purposes. So we had a guy that would teach encryption, for example. I would teach things like log management and, projects of things like, since Windows, it was a big Microsoft initiative partnership with HP, and we tried to get our consultants to understand the kind of security things we could do. Obviously, hardening Windows being a big part of it, log management being a big part of it. So I used to train people even back then. We're talking almost 15 years ago, trying to make security people better and expand their security awareness in what HP could do, and to help them promote those kinds of services within there. And so, yeah, CAS kind of come full circle, right? Logs were important then. I was teaching people what you had to do to warn their clients to do better logging, and here we are. Definitely huge improvements a long time later.
So this risk assessment framework, is this particular for a specific industry or a certain facet of your enterprise, or can this be, is this like an ITIL type of risk assessment framework, or can it be integrated into SDLC, for example?
I think all of the above, really, right? I think the idea in just risk assessments in general is I want to improve my company's security posture. How do I do that? Is there something that I specifically want to comply with? Obviously, if you're retailers, you're going down the PCI path. We should all drink, now that I said that. If you're a corporate enterprise, generally you could go down the ISO 27000 path, or you could be a COBIT house or a COSO house. If you're government, you'd be a NIST house, right? And so I've got to assess myself every year, or self-assess myself, or hire a consultancy, which is what we were at the time. And you bring these experts in and you say, hey, I want you to measure how good I am against COSO, COBIT, NIST, BASIL, whatever. And I think it can work for small companies all the way to very, very large enterprises, because every company needs a place to start. And I have been promoting ISO 27000 as someone says, well, what should I follow? I tell people, start at ISO 27000, work on the things in ISO 27000, try to get good at those things. And if you really want to be very prescriptive, then just read PCI and fill in the blanks, because it's very prescriptive in what you have to do. And you can always map that against NIST. There's a mapping for NIST against ISO 27000, for example, or HIPAA, or any of these others, right? So if I need a place to start, what do I use? If you're in the financial industry, they use BITS very heavily, which is based on ISO as well. And you get these, companies get these questionnaires sent to them. And it's becoming more and more normal these days that companies get mailed or asked or audited by their major providers, customers, that they're providing services to and say, hey, I need to assess you for risk, and I'm going to send you a questionnaire or 20 because you have 20 customers doing it, and suddenly you're overwhelmed by all these questionnaires and none of them are mapped the same. So for small organizations, medium organizations, even some larger organizations that haven't taken up a true risk management model or a security framework, which is what we're going to talk about, this can apply to all those and guide people. Well, where do I start, and how do I do it? Well, you can bring somebody like me in, and we'll assess you to this framework, and we'll tell you where to improve. The ISSM stuff at HP was very structured. And it applies to anything small all the way to large. I also think an important part, a lot of the listeners here, it's like, I'm too small for that. I don't need that. If you're being overwhelmed with these member requests, saying, hey, you belong to my consortium, you're providing services for me, you're one of my members, I need you to comply to my rules. I'm going to send you this questionnaire, or I'm going to come in and assess you. And you get that from 20 people. If you then say, 20 of these questionnaires is a lot of work for my 2-person, 3-person staff, I'm getting overwhelmed. Is there a way I can do better and just maybe provide them something in return? And this is where companies go down the SSA 16 path or the ISO 27000 certifications. And so they get these questionnaires and they return immediately the answer. I'm not going to answer this. I'm 27000 certified, or here's my ISO 27000 assessment by XYZ. To try to streamline those questionnaires is another reason why you'd want to consider this.
Yeah. Oh, I see. So you kind of, instead of answering their customized questionnaires, all these one-offs, you throw them back your ISO 27000 compliance framework doohickey and say, hey, go map it yourself.
Correct. It can be difficult for some companies to accept that, but I worked with a company in Wisconsin, and it worked so well. They did get ISO 27000 certified, and their competition bottomed. So the success of getting them there was obvious in the fact that their competition bought them. They were very happy with that. But that allowed them to get more. I mean, we were getting pounded with these questionnaires from their big bank clients and their real estate clients. So it's like, well, let's just get certified. I'll help you get certified, and you can just return them the certification and just refuse to answer it unless they want to do follow-up. And we got rid of probably half of the effort there by doing. Yeah,
that. We've had something very similar to that at our company. The first thing we do is we throw them our SOC 2, and we say, okay, here's your SOC 2. And sometimes, whether they be a vendor, because we do a lot of third-party agreements because we're like a support kind of people. We send them our SOC 2, and then they may have a questionnaire that they want us to fill out, which is, sometimes those questionnaires have been cobbled together from a number of different places, so they're not standardized in any way. And we have a third-party actual questionnaire that we use to say, okay, it's called SIG or something, and it's a standardized questionnaire that is, I guess, for the financial community in nature, but it has basically a lot of the questions that these companies already are supposed to ask, and some questions they don't even know to ask. And we send them that, and they go, okay, if this answers any of all your questions, you're fine. And we found that we were doing a lot of one-offs, and it was a pain in the ass. So it's actually reduces requirements for and actually increases turnaround time. So instead of 2 weeks to get a questionnaire done, you can get it done in hours.
Now, you've actually hit on exactly what the BITS framework was designed for in the financials, was that exact reason. All the banks were using the same providers. All the banks were using similar service organizations, and so they developed the whole BITS SIG stuff specifically to address this one-off scenarios, so that their vendors could service 3 banks and return the same answer to all of them. And that was something that was developed out of that. I definitely had to answer a few of those as a part of this process. Yeah. And so that's, but that was also just one part of their business. They had to deal with real estate people as well. And, they were ad hoc. You get these banks that didn't follow BITS or give you SIGs. They get these one-off 27,000 or COSO questionnaires, and you're like, what? I can't cut and paste because I got to figure out what the heck this question means, and it's just incredible burdensome on a lot of these small, medium, and small, large companies that just can't staff and fill in these questionnaires. And unfortunately, today it's getting worse more companies are asking their vendors, providers, and member, partnerships to assess themselves or send people in and actually get assessed on premise and investigate. And it's becoming a big burden.
Yeah, we get some
doesn't.
We get some jackhole companies that won't take our SIG or whatever, and we end up having to do a one-off or just have another meeting with them to walk through our SIG. And there's still some jackhole companies out there who don't trust our questionnaires. So yeah, totally understand.
And they may be required to do it themselves and don't even look through your answers. They just file it away and say, "Hey, we done our due diligence." And the minimum bar, so your company's doing all the work filling out this questionnaire for nothing, basically to check a box.
Yep. So when you worked at HP, this risk assessment framework, according to our show notes here, it was divided into 7 core components.
Yeah, the what did we call those things? 7 core components, basically, right? So
yeah,
those are the breakdowns of the things we did within the engagement, right? So the first one being a risk model. So think of it this way: we got a auto manufacturer, and so before we do anything, the risk model has to take a look at what are their most likely threats, right? And that can be a car manufacturer, which there's some irony here because I did this a long time ago for one of the car companies where they were looking at putting what they called the music entertainment into the car. And so you had to look at what they did as a company business and said, well, what are their risks? Well, they're putting intelligence in a car. There's a risk. They're a manufacturing plant surrounded by a big parking lot. There's a risk. There's no fence. It's next to a railroad. It's in a flood zone. It's in Tornado Alley. And you go through all these modeling of the potential risks that you have outside of just technical controls, right? Because you'll get to the technical controls as part of ISO, but the first thing is to model the risk from that perspective, right? And then you try to come up with the likelihood and the projected impact of what might occur. Hey, this is your core data center. It's on the ground floor, and you're in a 10-foot flood zone. And it happens every 20 years and it hasn't happened in 21 years, that sort of stuff, right? There's the infosec framework, which again is the domains and concepts. So that's going to be your ISO, COSO, COBIT, HIPAA kind of stuff. There's the controls and inventory and compliance stuff. That's the engine we would collect that had all the scoring and the maturity model information collected. There was the reference guides, which we basically looked at again, the ISO COBIT kind of stuff, right, that we mapped to a CMM. So the reference guide would be ISO 27000 or the reference guide would be COSO version 5 or whatnot. And then the reference maps were the mappings of these things, the flows, the process flows of how they all go together. And then we had these control templates, which were very detailed about the controls within ISO. So when you're talking about malware, let's say, you would assess that person for those controls in the malware, and you would record that information. And then you had knowledge base, what knowledge base is out there, the knowledge that you can add to it. Well, Gartner Magic Quadrant, for example, is a perfect example of a knowledge base. Whether you like it or not, different problem, but that's an example. Where can I map? Okay, you got a big hole here. Gartner says this, or Forrester says this, or any industry tends to be here. We would try to share that with the customers to try to send them off into a direction to investigate things. And that's kind of the 7 areas that we worked on as a part of this.
All right. So you went over the infosec framework. Is there any when you come in, do you say, okay, because you're this type of company, or do they tell you, okay, we have to be PCI, we have to be NIST, we have to be FedRAMP, we have to be, do they supply you with that information? Do you tell them that, and then you go, okay, yeah, and here's how the controls and inventory on number 3 match up with your current compliance levels?
Yeah, we would grab that info as a part of the initial assessment. What do you have compliance-wise and whatnot? And so we would gather that and say, well, what do you have to comply to? What are the kinds of things? What industry? So let's say we assessed 100 companies. HP did this all the time. Once we rolled this out, all of us did it as part of engagements pretty regularly, probably 5, 6, 7 times a year sometimes. And let's say I focused at healthcare, so I had 7 or 8 or 9 healthcare. We could take the data output from healthcare and say, okay, you're a healthcare provider too. Go see your Blue Shield Blue Cross of Seattle, right? So you can take that information of those scores. Well, here's you compared to the other clients we had that have also done this. So we can provide those kinds of metrics to them as well, and how that particular industry is doing, and the particular things we saw, either weaknesses or, right now, obviously, healthcare is being attacked. Malware is an issue. So let's say endpoint security was a poor failing. We could help guide them to say, look, others did really well here, and you don't read about them in the news, so you really need to beef up this area. And so we kind of use that data to help reinforce what we found with you is kind of the similar with others within that industry, if we could. Sometimes you couldn't.
So with information like risk models, like you mentioned, parking lots and things. When you were doing these, did this predate the information sharing centers? I know when we had, I don't know how old, how long it's been since you've done this, but like when we had Brian Engel on, who's the executive director of the retail CISC, the Information Sharing Center, he could share information about specific threats with members of his organization, be it, other retailer like Target and Walmart and all those. Did you have access to kind of things like that, or like law enforcement or FBI information, like with the InfraGard, for instance?
Yeah, unfortunately not, because this goes back about 15 years. The information we would do if we worked with some clients, that had an incident or whatnot, sometimes we're brought in before, sometimes we're brought in before and after an incident, that sometimes we could read the reports that were given from their providers. So we didn't have that luxury of having info sharing back then. It was pretty new. There might be some conferences that people went to, but other than that wasn't available to us.
I see. Okay.
So where do we start here?
How about we start where it started?
Okay.
Back in the late 90s, Bruce Schneier coined the term that we all use in trying to solve our problems with people, process, and he pointed out that technology was now a piece of the pie when you were doing your assessments of ITIL or whatnot. That, hey, we got this big technology piece. You got to assess that too. You can't just throw stuff on the internet and not look at it, right? It's people, process, and now it's technology too, you dummies, right? So Schneier kind of coined that term, PPT back in the late 90s, and it kind of stuck for IT to say, hey, we got this technology piece now. We got to make sure we take that into account. And so that got expanded into what ISSM and others do as well. Take into account, you're familiar with the common maturity model, CMM model, which has a 5-layer or 5-step process: initial, repeatable, define, manage, and optimizing. And so you take something like technology and you look at it and you say, well, where are you with your endpoint defenses? Well, you're just getting started. You don't have an agent. You're not logging whatever. You would give them an initial score of 1 because they're just initially starting. Or, wow, you're really good at this stuff. You're in optimizing. And so you take what Schneier started, and then you start applying the things like ITIL, which initially had no security in it, and then you apply the common maturity model, and you now take what we used to do with just measuring process, and you have the people to execute those processes, add the technology piece, and then measure the common maturity model, and suddenly you could start getting somewhere in measuring the gaps in your framework or your security program.
Now you do that CMM with what different types of, technologies? Do you do that with people and process as well?
You do. So you look at something like an ISO 27000 item. God, I had to pull one up to remember it. It's been a while. Access control. So you would look at access control or cryptography or any of the areas that were to be measured, and you'd say, okay, I'm gonna rate asset control, and of course there's lots of subcategories to asset control, and you go through each one of those, and you say, okay, do you have the people, and are you mature in this area? Do you have the processes? Do you have the policies? Right. So the P5 model, the hand of security, as I used to refer to it as, you got to have policies in our business. You got to have the rules. You got to enforce. Well, what's the rules for the people to surf the internet? Do you have a policy for that? Well, no. Okay. You score 0 on, access control. Right. then you go through and say, well, do you have processes people can follow to request access to be able to surf the web to anywhere and everywhere? Yeah, we actually have a form. Okay, it's repeatable, so there's a 2. And do you have the right amount of people to do this job? Oh no, we're seriously understaffed. And so each one of these, you go through and ask these questions, and you rate them from 1 to 5, initial to optimizing, and you go through. Do you have the policies for this item? Do you have the people, the process? Do you have the products? Do you have technology? We refer to it as P's, so they're all products as technology now. And do you have an endpoint client, or do you have a web gateway? And you try to add that technology piece into this process. And then, hey, can you provide me a document that shows you're actually logging for failed attempts? You have to ask for the proof. And so you go through each one of these for every item.
Okay, so let me slow down. So you're taking one of the things in ISO 27000, and you're saying, okay, let's measure it against the P5 model. Number 1, policy. Do you have policies in place for this item? Number 2, processes. Do you have the processes in place for this item? Number 3, people. Number 4, products or technology. And number 5, proof. Can you prove to me that you have been doing this?
Yep.
Is that right?
Correct.
That kind of reminds me of when I did my little stint in consulting with healthcare companies. There was we called it the triangle. It was like, what's the policy? What's the process, and is it following the policy? And third was, does it make sense, and is management actually know what the policy and the process is? So as long as you've got all those in proper alignment, you're doing pretty well.
Yeah, the thing to keep in mind here when you're measuring this sort of stuff is to try to make it repeatable year after year. Am I making improvements in the areas that I need to, and is there a way to measure that every year? Most security assessments, consultancies that go in there can't really do that very well. It's been a long time since I've done this as a consultancy business. I tend to do them ad hoc now if I need to for somebody asking for help. But I don't see a lot of people that have a very complex, database data entry system that goes through and measures, calculates the maths, provides spider charts and graphs and heat maps and all the things to say, yep, last year you got a score of 105. This year you got a score of 110. You increased better here and you fell here, and here's why. And that's when companies are trying to improve and because they've been sued or they've been breached or whatever the reason they're driven to improve. This repeatable process is real important to try to show value, right? It's the whole GRC idea of, hey, I'm gonna record all these risks, I'm gonna track them, and I'm going to improve.
When they brought you in, you said it was post-incident. Was this often, because did they have to do their risk assessments because of an incident that occurred, or was the majority of it just a CYA thing? We've got an audit coming up. We want to make sure that we're good.
Yeah, kind of both. I would say rarely we were brought in after an incident, but though I definitely did one of those or two of those or maybe a few. So most of them are audit related. Yearly, I'm allocating some budget. These are very large companies. They like the idea of getting a scorable, repeatable process they could do every year. It was mapped against an industry standard that again was dominant back in the 90s with ISO coming out. Clear, concise. ISO is a good read compared to a lot of other stuff. ISO is a good read, and PCI was starting to get its teeth into things, right? So I would say everything from companies just wanting to improve to I'm about to be audited, or I've been audited, or I want to get ISO certified. One of my clients was ISO certified, and I actually failed them. So because I took a realistic approach. I'm going to say, look, this area is a weakness. If they came in and assessed you again, this might fail you. So I had to be more harsh because I wasn't the one giving you the certificate. I wanted to make sure you understood that this area was weak.
Did you also sell the, hey, we have a service to help you get better at the deficient areas? Did you catch them coming and going?
Our practice was pretty agnostic. We didn't have any product under our consultancy at HP. We were solely a services organization that focused at this risk management area and helping tactical solutions and whatnot. Now, granted, if you wanted a product guy to install product XYZ, potentially one of our guys may have known that, but for the most part, that was nice. So we didn't have that. So we didn't push HP product. We did obviously follow up large project management kind of scenarios with clients who really wanted to implement this framework and could do this, multi-month engagement to try to get processes documented, bring somebody in and, write the policies that were missing, improve the processes, do bake-offs with products if need be, really, kick it in the ass if they got a good budget to kind of bring it up to snuff so they can get certified or whatnot. So we did have that as a post offering, but we didn't sell any products. So we weren't kind of, saying, hey, you need a bunch of antivirus, and we sold antivirus. So it didn't work that way.
So when you were doing your risk assessments, you mentioned, doing your threat model and what have you. Were you using any kind of specific framework for that? Was it qualitative or quantitative, or did you use an in-house one that was developed by HP, or did you just try to stick with industry standards?
Industry standards. So this thing got baked by, I believe we bought his company. I'm pretty sure that he worked for Tari. I mentioned him earlier, Tari Schreider. And he was the genius behind this thing, had this spreadsheet that would blow your mind. You basically went to the various pages, recorded all your notes in various places, recorded your scores in various places, and it was all based on ISO 27000, and then began the long, arduous task of mapping all that stuff to all the other things. So everything was based on ISO 27000, and you piped in your scores, and you got fancy graphs out of it. And then Tari and gang, even after I left, they made a database and an application and really took it to a whole new level.
Oh, well, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay. So I'm looking at some of the documents you've got here. So
walk us through like a typical engagement.
Typical engagement first started off by us having a pre-engagement conversation with the client. Try to understand what their business is. What do you do? Where are you located? What's the addresses of all your physical locations? Ask all the questions you don't need to be on site to ask, to get an idea of what research I can do before I even get there. The idea behind that would be like the car manufacturing plant. Are you subject to floods? Have you ever had a flood? And you can ask some of these questions. You do it on site as well. And you spend about 2.5 days on site, and you start asking all these questions. Unfortunately, meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting, questioning people, gathering the information, having people, within the next few days, bringing you proof. Any proof that didn't reside then, go ahead and send me this report. I'm looking for these specific items. Just show me something that says you've done this. Not just yesterday, but last quarter or last year as well. And because, of course, audits, right? You generate the stuff just before the audit. And then once you do that, I'll go through that big, huge questionnaires, gather the score, you come back and you crunch all that stuff. And you basically have to take all your notes, develop a report. Here's the findings. Anything that was a shortcoming or a gap, you would have to document and say, well, here's the gap. Here's why I think it's a gap. The client would get a proof of that so they could go through it and say, I disagree with this. Okay, then by all means, let's go through the questions again. Let's go through the policies, process, people, products, and proof thing again. And if you can, provide that this time around, then we'll improve the score. That did occur. And then sometimes we went back, depending on what the client's requirements were, to actually present the findings. And we tried to prioritize those findings as to what kinds of things you needed to improve upon, and then potentially the higher risk ones first. Right, internet-facing servers, we found this area is really weak, so you really might want to beef this up. Or you've had 3 floods in the last 15 years, you might consider moving this thing over there or putting it on the second floor, not on the first floor. Things like that were obvious, that could be easy, low-hanging fruit and easy wins, or potentially very large risks.
So go ahead.
Then that was a typical engagement, lasting a week to 2 weeks to a month.
The gist behind it is to basically provide a company with this assessment that can kind of balance the funds that they might have going towards something that may not have the best value, and moving it to something that is more risky that they really need to address. Does that kind of sum up why these risk assessments were done in this manner? With the whole spider graph type thing?
Yeah, I think mostly how's my program doing on a regular basis. CISOs wanted to really understand how good their program was more than anything. If they shifted budget, that's something I wasn't exposed to as part of the program. That might have been in our bigger engagements where we had some project managers and stuff trying to, implement some of these things and walk through some of these things. Yeah, I think we did a large power company or something where that occurred, and everything. I mean, there was bake-offs, there was all kinds of stuff. I did some tactical work for them as a part of that big project. But for the most part, I think it was a way that a CISO could see how his program was doing consistently year after year on a scored basis, take the spider graphs and charts and things we provided him, help him define his budget and what to ask for, justify it by using these reports, and help give him a strategy and direction based on an industry standard like ISO 27000. I think that was its core, really, more than anything. Is hey, I want to get better at this. I'm the new guy on the block, and I want to bring this in and budget for this every year, and that's what I'm going to do.
So your assessments must require a lot of metrics. What if you get in? Have you ever gone into a company and they go, well, we don't have the metrics to help you with that? Is that the first thing you would go like, well, we'll come back in 6 months when you actually have metrics or something that we can measure? Or do you find metrics that you can measure?
I think GRC kind of came out of these efforts from back in the day, right? That was the thing that metrics needed. Clearly, people didn't have any metrics. They didn't record how many breaches they had. Or breaches is the wrong word. That's a generic term. And they didn't do that either, right? They didn't record the breaches. But even an incident of any kind, whether it was power to malware, whatever, they really didn't record this. And kind of the boon in the early 2000s and later of GRC, clearly a big thing now, I think came out of the fact that, hey, I don't have anywhere to record this stuff. SharePoint ain't cutting it. So there wasn't any of that stuff when we were available. It might be some notes, or there might have been something somebody did some ad hoc stuff for, but this was, ISO was a fairly new standard in the late 90s. Didn't have, there was basically, 17799, which, morphed into 27001 and 2, and now there's a whole series of them, right? All those didn't exist then when we did this. So I think GRC and the ISO expansion kind of grew from these early efforts of consultancies to say, we need to record this stuff. We need to be repeatable. I need this data to get budget. I need to prove my program is necessary, and here's why. So I think those products were kind of an evolutionary thing of these early efforts of assessing.
Yeah. So ISSM, in the way that AHP is calling it, or was calling it, was the Information Security Service Management Reference Model. Security Service Management reminds me a lot of when we had Tim Wood on talking about ITIL. Was this something that kind of integrated well with things like ITIL, where you had a service-based organization or you had service-based departments that ran in that manner?
Yeah, that was actually some of the shops that wanted us, people that were an ITIL shop. HP had a big ITIL management organization that did a lot of services there. Those shops that wanted to be really good definitely used these services. So ITIL was a big part of it. Did not have security, but we mapped. That's another thing, Tari. The guy was a genius in this area in regards to this whole program. Is he mapped the ISSM model to ITIL, where it could be mapped before security was even a thought in the ITIL process, and said, well, here's how ITIL applies to it. And there were some clients where they actually integrated the ISSM into the ITIL model. It's doing that. So yes, ITIL is definitely a part of this idea, and there was a lot of work actually with ITIL shops and ITSM to get this integrated into that.
So guys like us, why is this important? Why should we spend effort on something like this?
Well, that's the crux of the challenge of all of our listeners here, right? Where do I start, or how do I improve? I think ISO 27001 is the best place. It's the most thorough of all the standards, unless you're a retailer and you have to do PCI. But I would still base everything you do off of ISO 27000 and then use PCI as my hammer, my sledgehammer, right? You have to assess yourself, whether you create your own little spreadsheet, whether just dump the topics and the subtopics, the controls and whatnot into a spreadsheet, and you say, look, do I have this thing? I think it's important that everybody looks at it and say, well, where do I start? Well, just measure you on that. Take 27,000 and look at each category, right? Look at the model of 27,000, go to each item and ask yourself the question, am I any good at this? Am I new at this particular area? Am I really, can I repeat this item? Is it well defined in an organization? Is it managed? Am I optimizing it, like really good at it? And then do I have the policies, the processes, the people? So take the CMM model and, hey, as simply as just scoring it yourself a 1 to 5, just print out a copy of ISO 27000, go through each one and give yourself 2 scores, right? Put down the 5 items on every item. Put policy, process, people, products on ISO 27000 for each one of these items. 12.1.2. And then say P1 equals defined. P2, which is process, P1 being policy, P3 being people, P4 being products, P5 being proof. And then just give yourself a score. And just start there as simply as that, right? It's just a great way for companies to start to see where they're at. You can take it all the way to what HP's doing, but hey, you can just literally buy a copy of this thing for whatever it is, $149 online, and literally just apply the CMM 1 through 5, the P5 model of policy, process, people, products, and proof, and bam, you can assess yourself and move towards possibly an ISO certification if you want to get that good at it, if you really need that, and start there. It doesn't take this, big program that we worked on HP for the SMBs or even a small large company to actually do this. It is fairly straightforward if you kind of just take those bits out of it. Is look at the CMM, do the P5, score yourself, move from there.
So you basically begin with the end in mind. You have a destination, ISO 27000, and you mentioned the cost. It's $149 to get the documentation or the documents, and then work towards that. That's your goal. Whether you have budget or not, you gradually get to that destination, right? Score yourself. It probably shouldn't take that long if you run through each one of the ISOs. Just give yourself a base score. Do I have these 5 Ps, and give yourself a score? Is that pretty much the gist of where you think security people should start?
Yes, that is the gist of it, right? So what you want to do, let's just look at asset management of ISO 7799 2005, just something I remember, responsibility of assets 7.1, right? Can't secure what you don't know you have. And you say, okay, I'm going to think common maturity model. I'm going to look at it and say, I'm going to score myself. So I'm going to look at inventory of assets, 7.1.1. I'm going to say, do I have a policy on how we're supposed to track the assets? What's the rules? Yeah, I got a policy. All assets must be maintained in an asset management program. Cool. I've got a policy. And do you think it's initially starting? Do you think it's a repeatable process, a defined process, a managed process, optimizing process? I'm pretty good. It's managed as well. I can pretty much, we enter our stuff. I've never had a problem of it missing. Boom, give yourself a 4. Go on to the next one. Ownership of assets. Do you know all the owners of your assets? So if something gets breached, you know who to call, or compromised, you know who to call. Yeah, actually, I do. Our system's really good at that. Boom, give yourself another 4. And do that for each one. Do you have the policy? Do you have processes? Do you have people? Do you have enough people to manage inventory of assets? Do we have a product to do it? And score yourself 1 to 5 on each one of those. And just one at a time, go down this list. Now, granted, there's, 16 sections of ISO. You also have to look at the program itself as, ISO is a program and the controls are the controls of that program. So you have to go back and rate your own program, but do the controls first and then build your program from that. And literally just print this thing out. It's only, 110 pages or whatever it is and go through each one. Build yourself a little spreadsheet. Doesn't have to be very complex, and just apply this common maturity model scoring to the P5 model, and boom. I think probably in a few days you could rip through it if you and do it honestly. You're not going to help yourself if you don't honestly do it.
It would also help if you had, more than just one person helping you out with this, because we've got at least a team of 3 in our company trying to get ISO and NIST certified, and you got to set realistic guidelines, but you have to, if you're not required to have the ISO, it's okay to, set less than realistic guidelines. But yeah, if you're having a deadline and it's required, then you're going to have some human power behind, or manpower behind that.
Yeah, I tell people, I interviewed with a company a couple years back, a couple employers ago when I left the state, and I said, look, it's going to take you about 2 years to get to the point where you can probably get this certification. I assumed, based on my questions, that they were new, so they were definitely in the initial stage of most everything. And if you take that into account, you even get to the point you create all the policies. And I also tell people to kind of cheat on the policy thing, literally take ISO, dump it out into a Word document, have the numbering exactly the same, use it as your policy document so you don't have to spend a lot of time on policies, tweak it as you need to, put it in your verbiage and whatnot, but try not to make it so you have to rewrite the damn thing every year when something gets changed. And, start there. But you got to get these policies written. You got to get some processes developed, because this company also wanted to go after SAS 70, SSA 16. And so I said, this is going to take you 2 years, because you literally have to get to the point where resources have to be available. They have to spend time on it. Right. And it just takes time. It's going to take you 6 months to get that going, that everybody understands and starts working this documentation into their daily job or weekly job, because most of us, documentation is the last thing we do in all aspects of a business, unless you're a document writer, right? Unless you're a technical. And so it takes
you
time
also have to
evolve.
You also have to say that it's going to take man time, but it's also going to cost money. So they have to be willing to invest money in either possibly technology, hiring new people. There's a lot of long hours that are going to be spent, and possibly overtime and stuff. So they have to budget for being ISO compliant, not only just getting to that point, but maintaining it.
Absolutely. It's a cost of that assessment, right? You got to hire somebody to do it. You've got to have people available. You got to be ready. Probably I would tell people, hire a project manager in some way, form, or manner, where they have to outsource it. In this particular company up in Wisconsin, that's exactly what we did. I was their security consultant. They brought a lady in for the project management, and she ran getting those things collected and done. She was the whip cracker, and basically stuff got fed to me to do the security aspects of it, and I had to provide her the results. And she ran with the program to get that thing going. So you're going to need that kind of asset. That's money. That's time. People are going to have to dedicate 2 hours a week, 3 hours a week, 4 hours a week. Companies need to understand that if you really want to get good at this. But again, if you don't have to comply and you just want something to go off of, again, ISO 27000, print it out, score yourself, boom, and then mature from there.
Yeah. Well, for a lot of the small companies that are just starting out, it would behoove them to think in this direction, because if the long game is to, if your long game is to actually grow your company or grow bigger, then you're going to be doing this stuff eventually. So you should do it while your complexity in your network and your processes are less, I would imagine.
Right. Tell the company, hey, do ISO, log management's in there, right? So I got to do log management. What does that mean? Well, enable your logs. PC. If I tell people after that, if you want to get good, be able to pass something, I would assess you, because I'm going to be more harsh than the guy who's assessing you, because I have to be. I want to make sure that I'm very thorough at what I assess you at. I want you to get better. I basically try to grade you at an A level. Again, when you actually get audited for these certifications, you're basically going to pass at a C or possibly D level. But I want to shoot for A, so hopefully you can reach C and actually get the assessment and get the certification passed when you finally do it. And that's just the reality of it, right? But I tell people, all right, this isn't clear enough for log management. What do I do from there? We'll go look at PCI. Well, PCI, tells me I have to do for failed checks and things like that. Great. It's more prescriptive. And so if you're to the point of getting there, you're probably going to pass your audit. And that's kind of how I tell people to take an ISO, higher level verbiage and take it down to a detailed verbiage. Just go print for free the PCI standard and then apply that. But make sure you map everything to ISO, because there's more high level type stuff in ISO that you will have to provide that PCI doesn't have.
Awesome. Well, Mr. Betcher, do you have any last thoughts here about your information security service management reference models?
Well, I like what Michael brought up about the questionnaires. I mean, you got all these clients or service providers, whatever, that that you need to fill out their customized questionnaire that they came up with somehow, and those things take hours,
Days, man, days.
to fill out, and
They're awful.
And if to just slap them an ISO cert or some document that says, yes, we map to this, whatever. I mean, that takes minutes. So you're saving so much time.
Yeah. Well, imagine if you took ISO 27000, you take the index, and you dump out all this, the 13 sections of ISO. I think it's up to 16 now. And you basically just take the table of contents, and then you, in Word, add a bunch of bullets, and you put those P5 model, and you basically measure and assess yourself with the maturity model and the P5 model, and you handed that to somebody who says, hey, tell me a little bit about your information security program. And somebody handed me this document, I would be so freaking impressed. I would say, you're so way ahead of most of the people we assess. You may not have the policies, but at least you've taken a look at it. You've at least admitted you have a problem, and you're scoring yourself. You've taken this initiative on your own, and now there's something that's measurable. Now let's, I'm the assessor guy. I want to see if you're, a viable person for doing our services. So prove to me that you came to a 4 on this score, and then it makes it much easier. The other thing about these questionnaires is they're burdensome, and the worst part of it is the question they ask you is worded so differently that the answer you give also is different. You can't just copy and paste. You really, unfortunately, have to comprehend these questionnaires that you're handed, and you have to say, what do they mean by this? Oh, I can't copy and paste this. I got to change the wording. And that's just incredibly burdensome. But I'd be really impressed if a company gave me an index of ISO 27000 with the P5 on there and a score and said, here's our self-assessment. That would impress the hell out of me.
Yeah, and the quicker you get back those questionnaires, it could also be the difference in securing the contract or them moving along to someone else.
Yeah, that's true too.
Yep.
And I have to say, this ISSM model that we worked on at HP that Tari brought in and expanded had to be the best thing that I ever saw coming out of our security practice. I guess next to my hardening methodology that we developed there as well. Of
course.
But I would say this is better than that, because this was something that was measurable. My stuff, my hardening methodology was a tactical item that solved, locking down the systems for compliance and just hackers. But this was a very impressive thing. You could leave a company after doing one of these assessment engagements and really have an idea where they sat. And it allowed us consultants to really recommend better solutions. And we tried to even taking this all the way down to the current, leaders of the pack solutions that you might want to consider, to give them a short list of the technologies they should basically evaluate and bake off on. It got down to those kind of details. It was really quite an impressive program. One thing I would say I really liked about our practice was this capability.
Awesome. Well, I think that's about all the time we've got for this week. Mr. Gough, as if you haven't been on the podcast enough, how would people get a hold of you if they wanted to contact you, maybe to talk more about this or to talk about any of your lovely forensification type programs about logging and things?
Yeah, we actually got through a podcast without talking about malware at all, really. That's amazing.
We mentioned it.
For incident response. We mentioned it, but that's it.
We did.
We haven't even mentioned our little project that Mr. Betcher and I are.
Oh, no. He does that every week. It's cool.
Well, we're going to have some big announcements here coming up shortly, and people can find us at the website. You can go to imfsecurity.com. IMF is kind of a play on the impossible mission force, because security is such an impossible mission. Many think so. Or I'm Mother Frickin' Security, however you want to use those acronyms. But you can find us at imfsecurity.com and contact us through the website there. My personal ranting and raving is obviously I'm at Hacker Hurricane, and my blog is hackerhurricane.com, and all the collateral type stuff that I do in regards to logging and incident response and whatnot is at Malware Archaeology, because we're looking for archaeology is the study of artifacts of mankind, and so Malware Archaeology is artifacts of malware. And that's how people can get a hold of me. The Twitters or the website. Or the blog.
Twitter. What's Twitter?
At Hacker Hurricane.
Okay.
In Texas, we have to protect from hackers and hurricanes here.
All right. Well, that is true. Mr. Betcher, how would somebody get a hold of you if they wanted to discuss other than IMF security, because that's already been mentioned?
I'm on Twitter as well at Betcherpwned, BOETTCHERPWNED.
Okay. You can find the official BreakSec podcast Twitter at BreakSec, BRAKE Sec. You can follow me, the other Brian, at Brian Brake, BRYANBRAKE. We're on Facebook, we're on LinkedIn, we're on, TuneIn Radio, Player.fm, the Google Store, we're on iTunes. I know a lot of you are downloading this from iTunes. Feedback would be great. If you could, leave us something on there, that would be awesome. We're on, a number of different things. We're on Tumblr, all that kind of stuff. So feel free to hit us up and engage with us on those kinds of platforms. So, one last thing. B-Sides Austin is coming up. It's actually the weekend after this podcast is supposed to come out.
Correct.
Which is the first weekend in April.
Ironically, Brian and I are going to be announcing LogMD to the audience there, so they'll hear it here first if they're listening. But cool. Of course, LogMD, so discover it. Go to logmd.com, easy log-md.com. Sorry, almost screwed that one up. Log-md.com, and take a look, try it, discover the product, and you're going to see some significant things coming out here shortly.
If you go to logmd.com without the dash, I think it's like a doctor database of some sort from Canada. So yeah, don't go there, and don't what did we talk about last week or the week before? Bug bounties. Yeah, I don't know if they do bug bounties or any of that. Okay. Hey, Michael, how'd you like the studio?
The studio?
Yeah, the Breaking Down Security studio.
Yeah, world headquarters here.
It was virtually cool.
Very nice. Very nice. Very nice. So,
is it on ESXi or OpenCloud?
It's ESXi. Yeah, it's because it's more expensive, of course. So, only the best for our guests. So, the last thing I'm going to mention is we do have a Patreon. The podcast is always free, but we do have some overhead. Libsyn does make us pay for their service. So if you feel like you would like to give us a buck or two, maybe, it wouldn't go amiss in helping out the podcast a little bit. So you can hit us up over there on our Patreon. So gentlemen, that was fantastic. I have to get back to the ship and get my Mai Tai and start the conga line. So I will talk to you all next week.
I want to see you do the
Macarena. I can do the Macarena.
Not the Macarena. What's the pole you got to bend and go under?
No.
Oh, the limbo?
The limbo. I want to see you do the limbo.
No. You get enough alcohol in me, I may twerk a little bit, but
Oh.
Yeah, I can twerk. I can twerk like nobody's business. I already dusted off the old banana hammock, and I'm going to be hitting the beach, so it's going to be awesome. So. All right, everybody, that was it for this week. If your eye bleach is applying eye bleach right now, for Breaking Down Security, please come back next week and we'll talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.